5 days before Christmas, and the house already smelled like cinnamon, fir, and manufactured joy. I remember because I'd just finished setting the logs in the fireplace, adjusting the stockings like they mattered, and topping off the whipped cream on the mugs. 2 for her, 1 for me, 1 with marshmallows for the guest I didn't want. I was balancing the tray with one hand and nudging the hallway light off with the other when I heard her laugh. Delilah, my wife. Light and confident, that particular brand of laughter she reserved only for Bianca, her best friend and venomous shadow. It rang out from the living room like a bell struck too hard. Then came Bianca's voice, lower, thick with wine, and full of the kind of arrogance that only someone protected by the illusion of privacy dares to unleash. "Bet you he cries when we hand in the papers," she said. And I stopped walking. There was no dramatic crash. No spilled mugs or shattering porcelain. I didn't gasp. I didn't even blink. I just stood there 10 feet away, frozen in the dim hallway like a stagehand who accidentally walked into the middle of a scene he wasn't supposed to see. In the glow from the living room, their silhouettes flickered. Delilah curled up on the velvet couch in her favorite cream sweater. Bianca sprawled beside her, one leg tucked under, red wine sloshing in a stemless glass. "Men are so predictable," Delilah laughed, like the punchline of a joke they'd rehearsed. My wife, laughing at the idea of handing me divorce papers as if they were a prank, as if watching me fall apart was the grand finale to some long-running inside joke. The marshmallows began to melt faster than they should have, the heat slowly creeping through the ceramic into my fingertips. My arms stayed still, stiff, the tray hovering just above my waist like it was suspended by some invisible wire. But inside, something stopped. Breathing, moving, believing. I wasn't even sure if I blinked. I didn't want to miss a word. And they kept going. "Should we wrap it? Put it under the tree with a little tag?" Bianca asked, mock sweetness dripping from every syllable. "To Adrian from your loving, soon-to-be ex-wife." They both erupted into laughter, loud and unfiltered. The kind of laughter that fills a room and empties something inside you at the same time. My name in her mouth like it meant nothing. My presence reduced to a caricature. My role in her life discarded with the same flippant cruelty one might throw away wrapping paper. I backed up slowly, quietly, as if retreating would somehow erase what I'd heard. The tray didn't clink. My footsteps didn't creak. I turned on my heel and moved toward the kitchen, each step feeling like I was dragging a different version of myself. The loyal husband. The patient partner. The man who ignored the quiet insults and played along with the sarcasm at dinner parties. The man who told himself she was just tired, just stressed, just complicated. I set the tray down on the counter, letting the cups rattle softly. The whipped cream had begun to melt, sliding down the sides in lazy, sugary trails. I stared at it for a second, then reached for the nearest mug and dumped it in the sink. Then another, and another. Watching the cocoa swirl down the drain felt oddly satisfying. The last mug, I kept. The one I'd made for myself. I wrapped both hands around it like it was the only warm thing I had left. I could still hear them laughing. The sound traveled through the walls like betrayal wears boots. Every word that followed was muffled now, less distinct, but the damage was done. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't playful teasing. It was clarity, dressed in holiday cheer. They had planned this. My wife. The woman who said always in front of our families. Who squeezed my hand during storms and signed our anniversary cards with little doodled hearts. She was planning to destroy me like a performance, and she invited an audience. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. It was something quieter, colder, like my blood had slowed down, trying to process a new reality one beat at a time. I leaned against the counter and looked out the kitchen window. The backyard lights shimmered faintly against the snow-dusted grass. Our dog had died last spring. Delilah never wanted another. Said the house was too busy for a pet. But now it felt hollow. I could hear the emptiness in the quiet between their laughter. A photo on the fridge caught my eye. Us in Paris. 3 years ago. I remembered the man in that photo. I remembered how tightly he held her waist. How convinced he was that love meant enduring. I looked at his face now, and all I saw was a man clinging to a story someone else had stopped reading. They didn't know I was standing 10 feet away. They didn't know I had heard every word. And I didn't intend to tell them. Not yet. Not with heat. Not with shouting. That wasn't me. Delilah always said I was the calm one. That I didn't make waves. What she never realized is that still water isn't empty, it's deep. And when it starts to move, it doesn't splash. It swallows. So I drank my cocoa slowly, thoughtfully, then walked to the garage, past the living room where they were still sipping and scheming, my face a mask of neutral silence. I didn't say a word, didn't even glance their way. Delilah called out something about needing extra marshmallows, her voice bright and clueless. I nodded. Or maybe I didn't. Maybe I just kept walking. The cold air hit me as I opened the garage door. And for the first time that night, I smiled, not because it was funny, but because I knew something they didn't. They had written the first page of their betrayal. I had just flipped the cover of a new story entirely. It didn't start that night in the hallway, though that was when the silence in me finally found its voice. The unraveling of us, me and Delilah, had started long before, in tiny moments that didn't seem like anything at first. A glance held too long on her phone while I spoke. A sigh when I mentioned my dreams. But mostly, it came in the form of jokes. The kind she made in front of friends at dinner parties, where the lighting was soft and everyone's laughter came easy with wine. You know I could leave you tomorrow, right? She'd say, smiling like a queen, her eyes scanning the room for a reaction. People laughed. Always. Her friends, my friends, even me. I laughed like it didn't land in my gut every single time. Like it didn't hollow something in me. The first time she said it, I thought she was drunk, or tired, or trying to get a rise out of me. But it kept happening. Different variations, same punchline. Don't give me a reason to trade up, she'd say as I cleared plates. Or, this is why women have backups, when I forgot an errand. Everyone laughed because they thought she was funny. And she was. Sharp, charming, effortless. Delilah had the kind of wit that made her the center of every room without raising her voice. But I was always the punchline. I didn't know when I became it. I only realized when I stopped recognizing the man she joked about. I used to be proud of the life we built. The house with its creaky floors and the art she insisted we hang in the hallway. The Saturday morning spent grocery shopping, comparing coffee beans and arguing about whether almond milk was worth the hype. I thought that was the hard-earned normalcy people envied. But somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing me as her partner and started seeing me as the weight she carried. She didn't need to yell. She didn't throw things. Delilah had a way of hurting you without ever raising her voice. Just a glance, a well-timed smirk, a dismissive hand wave that made me feel like a dull instrument in her orchestra of polished friends. It wore me down in slow erosion. I'd wake up early, make her coffee the way she liked, cinnamon-dusted, 2 sugars, no cream, and leave it on the nightstand. She'd sip it, maybe nod, never thank me. She started spending more nights networking, wearing dresses that made me pause in admiration but returning with eyes that didn't quite meet mine. When I asked how her night went, she'd say, fine, and change the subject. It was always fine, always deflective. I stopped pressing. I told myself marriage was seasons, some bright, some cold, that this, too, would pass. But when the cold stretches into years, you stop pretending it's weather. It's climate. Permanent. I remember one particular evening in early autumn. We were at Bianca's place. A rooftop dinner with string lights and catered hors d'oeuvres. The usual faces. Bianca, her fiancé, though he didn't stay long, some of Delilah's colleagues from the nonprofit she chaired. We were all seated, wine glasses lifted in a toast, and someone had asked how we made our marriage last so long. He has no idea how replaceable he is, Delilah said, grinning over her glass. That's the real secret. The table burst into laughter. I chuckled too, though something in my chest cracked so quietly I barely noticed. She squeezed my knee under the table like it was a sign of affection, but it felt more like possession. Or pity. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't say anything for months. Because how do you confront someone about a joke? About the kind of remark that's meant to sting but leaves no visible wound? I tried. Once. We were in bed, and she was scrolling through her phone, and I asked her, gently, why she always joked about leaving me. She didn't even look up. Oh my God, are you serious? She said, laughing. You know I'm just playing. Stop being so sensitive. That word. Sensitive. As if noticing her pulling away was weakness. As if being hurt by the slow withdrawal of love was some defect in my masculinity. I let it go. I always did. There were times I tried to be what she wanted, more assertive, more aloof, more masculine in the shallow, glossy way her friends described ideal men. I started going to the gym more. I stopped over-explaining things. I learned to be silent when she mocked something I cared about. I became the version of myself that wouldn't get laughed at. but it didn't change anything. She just adjusted her humor to fit the new version of me. Instead of calling me soft, she'd call me fake. "Oh, look at you, Mr. Stoic now. Who are you trying to impress?" I didn't answer. I just kept folding the laundry. It's a strange thing how love fades. It doesn't burn out all at once. It peels away in layers, like old paint. One moment you're sharing dreams in the dark, and the next, you're sharing silence across a dinner table, both of you scrolling your phones, waiting for the other to speak first. I began to shrink in her presence, not because she told me to, but because every joke carved out a little more of my confidence. And she was always performing, even when there was no audience. Especially then. The people around us saw the curated version of Delilah, the generous, quick-witted, successful woman with a husband who worshipped her. I played my part, held her coat, smiled in pictures, laughed when prompted. She was charming in public, calculated in private. That was the version of her they applauded. But behind closed doors, when the lights dimmed and the crowd disappeared, there was no applause. Just cold air and the sound of her laughter echoing in my memory like the ghost of a life that wasn't mine anymore. It didn't start that night in the hallway. That night just confirmed what I already knew in pieces, that the love I had been holding on to was an illusion she no longer bothered to maintain. And the jokes? They weren't jokes. They were rehearsals, warm-ups for the performance they were planning. The day they'd hand me papers like a prop and expect tears for their amusement. But I wasn't crying. I was listening, learning, collecting moments like currency. The joke wasn't funny anymore, and I wasn't laughing. It was the kind of night that made rich people feel like kings. Rooftop gala, champagne towers, and lights that softened everything, even lies. I remember the sky, inky and cloudless above us, a stretch of velvet cut with the glint of city stars, and the low hum of music from some overpriced quartet hired to make us all feel cultured. Delilah floated through the crowd like she owned the air, wrapped in a deep emerald dress that fit her like intention. I was in a tailored suit, her choice, of course, holding her coat, nodding at names I didn't care to remember. She liked these events. She liked being seen. I was background. The stable husband. The accessory that didn't talk too much. She'd had too much champagne by the time we found our table again. She laughed too loudly, leaned in too close to every man that wasn't me. I didn't say a word. I rarely did in those spaces. Saying less was safer. But her eyes sparkled with something more bitter than alcohol. She'd been taking swipes at me all evening, small ones, the kind you can't call out without looking like you're overreacting. When I brought her a fresh glass, she raised an eyebrow and said, still trying to win points, "Adrian, you're so predictable." "I'm polite," I said, smiling through it. "You used to like that about me." She snorted and turned to Bianca, who had joined us midway through the evening with another new man on her arm. "He thinks consistency is a personality trait," Delilah whispered loud enough for me to hear. Bianca laughed, of course. She always did when it came to tearing me down. I didn't flinch. I reached for a cocktail napkin instead, something to occupy my hands so I didn't ball them into fists. "You always talk about how easy it'd be to leave," I said, voice calm, measured. "Why don't we make it official then? You want out so badly. Maybe we draw up a prenup. Make it clean when you eventually do." Delilah blinked, caught off guard for just a second. Then her lips twisted into that smile, the one she used when she wanted to mock me without moving her mouth too much. "Oh, look at you," she said, reaching for the napkin I held. "So dramatic. You want a prenup? Fine." She grabbed a pin from her clutch, one of those sleek gold ones she always carried for moments of inspiration, and scribbled her name across the napkin like it was a dare. The letters were sharp, fast, like she couldn't be bothered to slow down. Then she shoved it toward me and said, "Frame it. Put it in your little man cave next to your participation trophies." I didn't frame it. But I took it. I folded that napkin like it was made of silk and slipped it into my jacket pocket, right next to the cufflinks she gave me on our 5th anniversary, the one she claimed she picked out herself, though the receipt had her assistant's name on it. I didn't say anything then, either. I just nodded and raised my glass to her. "To honesty," I said. She rolled her eyes. The next morning, while she was still asleep in our bed, wrapped in designer sheets she once said were too good for basic people, I took the napkin to Marcus. He was the only person I trusted with this. Marcus, my quiet, razor-sharp friend from college, who had built a reputation as one of the most discreet and meticulous corporate lawyers in the city. He didn't ask questions. He looked at the napkin, raised an eyebrow, and said, "You really want to do this?" She signed it. "In front of witnesses," I replied. He nodded. "That's enough to start. But if we do this, we reinforce it properly. We don't leave room for interpretation. Make it bulletproof," I said. And he did. We drew up a full agreement, ironclad and precise. Delilah's signature, even on that flimsy paper, gave us a window. Marcus used it to craft a document that left no cracks, no wiggle room, no clauses she could manipulate. He had it notarized. We followed every protocol. The napkin became an anchor, and the agreement became a shield. For once, I had leverage. For once, she couldn't laugh her way out of something. Back home, Delilah never asked what I did with the napkin. She probably forgot. She was like that with things she didn't think mattered. People, too. She moved through the world assuming nothing would ever stick to her. That charm was immunity. That beauty could erase blame. I let her believe that. I let her live in the illusion that I was still the man standing quietly behind her, taking the blows with a grin. I didn't change my routines. I made her coffee. I kissed her cheek before leaving for work. I complimented her outfits even when she didn't ask. I played my part because I needed her to believe I was still the same man she thought was too soft to strike back. But something had shifted in me. That napkin, that moment, wasn't just a legal move. It was the first decision I made without her shadow hanging over it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vengeful. I was awake. And once you wake up, you can't go back to sleep. Every dinner party after that, every snide remark, every fake laugh, I filed it away. Not as pain, but as evidence. I began to watch her differently. Not as my wife, but as a character in a play I'd grown tired of watching. She noticed something eventually. One night she asked why I wasn't touching her as much. "Do I not turn you on anymore?" she asked, lips curled in mock concern. "You always do," I said, smiling. "I just think some things are worth saving." She laughed. "Since when did you become so cryptic?" I shrugged. "Maybe I'm learning from you." That shut her up for a while. And I kept moving. Quiet. Precise. Just like Marcus taught me. The napkin was tucked away in a fireproof box by then. The agreement backed up and filed, notarized copies in secure folders, and one mailed to my cousin in Phoenix for safekeeping. I wasn't preparing for a fight. I was preparing for her performance. Because if there's one thing I knew about Delilah, it's that she couldn't resist making a show out of anything. And when the moment came, when she pulled that envelope out with her smug smile and expected me to fold, I wanted to be ready. She thought that napkin was a joke, a taunt, a way to make me feel small. What she didn't know was that it was the last time she'd ever hold the upper hand. It started with a small black notebook I picked up from the hardware store. A pocket-sized thing with a scuffed cover and faintly lined pages that smelled of rubber and dust. I told Delilah I was fixing the garage shelves that weekend. She didn't look up from her phone, just waved her hand and said, "Don't forget to move the boxes with my charity gala stuff. I need space for the centerpieces." That was her priority, gala centerpieces. Mine was finally facing the reality I'd been ignoring. I slid the journal behind my tool cabinet, in the far corner where the light didn't quite reach. Every time I walked into that garage after that day, I wasn't fixing shelves. I was fixing my future. Every cruel remark she thought I wouldn't remember. Every side glance she gave when I spoke too long at dinner. Every time she came home 2 hours late from networking without so much as a text. I wrote it all down. The first entry was short. Bianca and Delilah, December 20th. Bet you he cries when we hand him the papers. Heard from hallway. No idea I was there. It looked so neat and harmless on paper. So clinical. But I could still feel the sting of that night in my chest every time I reread the words. I didn't let the anger run the pen. I just documented. That's what Marcus had told me. Keep it factual. Think like a lawyer. The emotion is valid, but facts win wars. So I made it a habit. Each entry dated. Specific. I listed names, locations, even the music playing in the background if I could remember. I began to see patterns, the rise and fall of her affection correlated with events, attention, or who she was trying to impress that month. It wasn't just about infidelity, though I began to suspect there was plenty of that too. It was about erosion. The way someone chips away at you until you don't recognize your own reflection without their disapproval shaping it. She mocked the way I drove too slow, too cautious. She rolled her eyes at my shows, called them Dad TV, even though we were the same age. She dismissed my thoughts on money, even though I was the one managing our bills, investing, keeping our foundation from crumbling. She called herself the visionary. I was the accountant, the organizer, the guy who kept the lights on while she lit up every room with borrowed shine. There were unexplained hotel receipts, too. I started collecting those. Small things. A charge from a boutique hotel on a Tuesday night she said she had a board retreat. A flower delivery billed to her card, but sent to a name I didn't recognize, Mason something. I didn't confront her. Confrontation gave her fuel. She'd flip it, find the weakness in my voice, mock the insecurity before I even finished the sentence. So I just watched, logged, stored. The notebook grew fuller. I bought a second one. There was a kind of freedom in it, strangely. Not revenge, clarity. I started paying attention to her rhythms, her tells. When she was lying, she touched her left earring. When she was bored, she blinked more than usual. When she was feeling superior, she did that thing with her lips, pressed them together, and tilted her head like she was already dismissing what you hadn't said yet. And most importantly, when she felt unthreatened, she got careless. She started leaving things out. Open tabs on the laptop. Half-deleted texts. She wasn't worried because she didn't believe I'd ever leave. Not really. She thought I was too loyal, too mild, too safe, as she often described me. And maybe I had been. For too long, I confused love with endurance. I thought holding on through the storms made me a man. But love doesn't demand you disappear to survive it. I started locking the garage. She thought it was because of the tools. I smiled and nodded. I built a shelf in front of the hidden compartment where the notebooks and printouts lived. A drawer under the bench held USB drives filled with backups, photos, text logs, even a voice memo or two when I caught her and Bianca talking too freely on speakerphone. I wasn't building a case out of malice. I was building it out of necessity. The day I heard her joke about cutting me clean before New Year, I wrote it down in capital letters. She said it on the phone while curling her hair in the bathroom, the door half open, her voice bouncing off tile. I want a fresh year, B. Clean slate. No more charity husband. I had just brought her coffee, my footsteps soft enough not to give me away. She didn't see me. I placed the mug on the counter and walked away. That night, I added a new entry to the file folder, charity husband. Fresh start. Timeline, before January 1st. And yet, she smiled at me over dinner like nothing was wrong. Told me we should book something for Valentine's Day. Told her friends I was still so attentive, bless him. The performance was seamless. But I wasn't in the audience anymore. One afternoon, while she was out, I walked through the house and started really looking at it, noticing what was mine, what she brought, what we built together, and what I'd let her take over. I made a list, not for spite, for division, for clarity, inventory of a marriage, the furniture, the books, the shared accounts, the car we never agreed on but she insisted we buy, the art she'd hung without asking me, the photos she refused to update, so people would always remember us at our best. I took pictures of everything, stored them on an encrypted drive. I made copies of financial documents, insurance policies, retirement accounts. I wasn't preparing to destroy her. I was preparing to protect the man I used to be before she dimmed him. In the mirror that day, I saw someone different. Not broken, not angry, just clear-eyed, focused. There was a calmness to the routine now. My evenings in the garage were no longer escapes. They were rehearsals for freedom. Delilah never noticed. She thought I was out there fixing things. And in a way I was. I wasn't building shelves. I was building a way out. There was always something about Bianca that rubbed me wrong. From the very first moment I met her, delicate hand extended, smile too wide, eyes that scanned rather than saw. I felt it. She was one of those people who spoke in compliments laced with hidden blades, made you feel like you should be grateful she tolerated you. And Delilah? She adored her. Hung on her every word like Bianca held the secrets to the universe. I used to think it was loyalty. Now I knew better. It was alliance. A co-conspiracy of entitlement and ego. Bianca never liked me. She never even pretended to. Maybe because I didn't kiss her ring like the others did. I didn't fawn. I didn't beg for approval. I didn't let her sharp comments draw blood. And that, to a woman like her, was unacceptable. Her friendship with Delilah had a kind of twisted intimacy to it, sisterly in name, but more strategic underneath. They fed each other's pride, echoed each other's flaws. Bianca whispered, and Delilah leaned in like it was gospel. They made a game of it. Of me. It started slowly, Nights when I'd come home and hear the tail end of conversations, their laughter louder than the words. Phrases cut off when I entered the room. "Oh, speak of the devil," Bianca would say, flashing a smile so fake it should have cracked her face. "We were just talking about you." Then a wink, a look exchanged with Delilah that said volumes. I used to ignore it. I used to think I was being paranoid. But after that night, the hallway, the tray, the laughter about Betty cries, I saw it all clearly. Every moment clicked into place. The way Bianca always brought wine Delilah liked, but I didn't. The way she'd planned girls' nights at the most inconvenient times, always encouraging Delilah to just breathe. "Babe, you need your freedom." The comments she made in front of me like I wasn't standing there. "You're way too hot for domestic life, Lila," or "Men like Adrian are dependable and boring." Little barbs, coated in sugar. Death by 1,000 smirks. What I didn't realize at the time was that Delilah let her. That was the part that stung more than anything Bianca ever said. My wife didn't defend me. She didn't pull her friend aside and say, "Enough." She joined in. She laughed. She mirrored Bianca's tone, added her own cruelty dressed up as cheeky charm. It was their version of bonding chipping away at me together. And they really thought I was too blind to see it, too kind to respond. They mistook my silence for weakness, not strategy. They thought I was just enduring. But I was watching, memorizing, recording in quiet moments the things they would never imagine I'd use. And still, the game escalated. They got bolder. They whispered less and schemed more. I overheard them on speakerphone once. Delilah in the kitchen, phone resting on the island while she chopped strawberries for a brunch dish she never ate. Bianca's voice crackled through the speaker, sharp and giddy. "You have to do it on Christmas. Seriously. Drama. Audience. Give him the envelope like it's a gift. Watch his face." Delilah laughed, soft and cruel. "He'll fold. Probably ask what he did wrong. I can already see the stammer." Bianca cackled. "Oh my God, please record it. I need it for my mental health." They were betting on my breakdown, wagering joy on my humiliation. That wasn't just betrayal. That was sport. And they played it with champagne in hand and manicures gleaming under soft light. Like cruelty was another kind of self-care. I didn't interrupt. I didn't even clear my throat to let her know I'd heard. I just walked back into the garage, took out my notebook, and added a new page, Christmas plan confirmed. Delilah and Bianca. Speakerphone. 12:22 p.m. Brunch prep. Verbatim quote. "Give him the envelope like it's a gift." Then I saved the phone's voice recording to my encrypted drive and backed it up in 2 places. Not out of vengeance, but because I knew the kind of women they were. Denial would be their first defense. Proof would be my shield. I started to study them, like a soldier observes the battlefield. I learned their rhythms. Bianca always dropped a comment after her 3rd glass of wine. Delilah always echoed her within 10 seconds, like she needed approval for cruelty. Bianca never came empty-handed. She brought distraction, disruption, bad advice disguised as sisterhood. Men like Adrian always need something to manage. Let him have the garage, babe. That's his little kingdom. Stay pretty upstairs. Delilah would nod, smile, and repeat it later like it was her original thought. It wasn't just Bianca, but she was the spark Delilah needed to unleash her worst self. Alone, Delilah might have hesitated. But with Bianca in the room, she lit matches and smiled at the flames. They underestimated me. Both of them. Thought I was the kind of man who unraveled in the face of betrayal. They didn't understand I'd been training for this, emotionally, psychologically for years. Each insult had been sandpaper, shaping something stronger beneath the surface. I wasn't planning revenge. That would have meant acting in anger. I wasn't angry. I was precise. Focused. My plans didn't involve shouting matches or dramatic exits. They involved legal clauses, forensic accounting, and patience. They were preparing a performance. I was preparing a close. I gathered not just evidence, but leverage. I updated our joint account permissions. I moved funds to accounts in my name only. Nothing illegal, just quiet protections based on terms we'd agreed to long ago when she still wore sincerity. I copied house deeds. I updated passwords. I made sure my name was on everything that mattered. Quietly. Smoothly. No trace. Because when you're the target of a game, the best response isn't to flip the board, it's to rig it before the players even sit down. And Bianca, smirking, poisonous Bianca, she would be sitting at the table when it happened. I made sure of that. Delilah's circle was a hall of mirrors, and Bianca was the biggest reflection. I wanted her there. I wanted her front and center when her voice cracked and her face dropped, and the script she wrote started unraveling line by line. They thought they were setting the scene for my collapse. What they didn't know was, I'd already rewritten the ending. The smell of rosemary and roasted garlic floated through the house like nothing was wrong. The table was set immaculately, because of course it was. Delilah had a way of turning every surface into a magazine spread. Gold-trimmed plates, crystal glasses that only came out for holidays, place cards with handwritten calligraphy, a candle centerpiece that flickered like it had been choreographed. Everything was perfect. On the outside, her parents had arrived just before 6. Lorraine and Mitchell, dressed like they were expecting cameras. Her mother in winter white, hair sprayed into something that defied wind, and her father in a gray sweater vest with matching socks. Bianca walked in next, uninvited but always expected, wearing a red satin dress that hugged her ambition. She kissed Delilah's cheek with an exaggerated "Merry Christmas, babe," and gave me a nod like I was a server at an event she barely cared to attend. I played my part, greeted everyone with a smile, poured wine, made conversation about traffic, weather, the rising price of imported cheese. I even laughed at Mitchell's story about a golf mishap, though I'd heard it before twice. My face hurt from smiling. My hands, steady as they refilled glasses, never once trembled. No one suspected a thing. Dinner was served at 7:04. I remember the time because I checked my watch just as Delilah tapped her glass with a spoon, drawing everyone's attention with that poised elegance she'd perfected. "Before we eat," she said sweetly, "I want to give Adrian his gift." Her tone was honey. Her eyes, steel. I saw the flicker of anticipation in Bianca's expression, the way Lorraine leaned back with folded arms like she was bracing for impact, and the way Mitchell looked down at his napkin, almost guilty. They knew. All of them. This wasn't just a gift. It was a moment. A stage. I was the audience, the act, and the afterthought. Delilah reached under her chair and pulled out a cream-colored envelope with a gold ribbon tied around it, as if dressing cruelty made it palatable. She held it out to me across the table, her smile wide and fake. "Merry Christmas, darling." I took it with steady hands, slid the ribbon off, opened it. Inside, divorce papers, professionally printed, signed by her, dated, her full legal name in ink. I scanned the first page without letting my expression change. The silence was a living thing in the room. Forks froze midair. No one breathed. Bianca was staring at me like she was watching the final act of a play she helped write. Her lips were parted, waiting. Lorraine leaned in, hungry. Mitchell rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. And Delilah watched me like she had already won. Like she thought she'd finally pulled the rug out from under the boring, dependable man she was so tired of pretending to love. I folded the papers in half, gently, reached into the inner pocket of my jacket, pulled out a pen. I looked up and met Delilah's eyes. "You sure this is what you want?" I asked, not out of weakness, but precision. One last chance to let her hang herself with her own rope. She laughed. "Of course. It's overdue." I clicked the pen, signed my name cleanly on the dotted line, and slid the papers back across the table. "Then happy holidays," I said, and smiled. Bianca blinked. Once. Twice. Like her brain had lagged behind the reality. Delilah stared at the signature, and for the first time, her mask slipped. Just a hairline crack. But I saw it. Confusion. Maybe even concern. I hadn't cried. I hadn't begged. I hadn't protested. I just signed. I leaned back in my chair, lifted my wine glass, and said, "To freedom." Mitchell cleared his throat. Lorraine looked irritated, like I hadn't followed the script. Bianca leaned forward, voice low and too sweet. "That's it. No words? No reaction." I turned to her. I gave her what she wanted. Seems like the only respectful thing to do. Delilah reached for the papers, hands tighter now, not as graceful. "That's it," she repeated. Her voice had lost some of its warmth. It wasn't a question. It was disappointment. I shrugged, took another sip of wine. "That's what you were betting on, wasn't it? That I'd crumble? Cry? Make a scene?" I let the silence sit. I'm not in the mood to perform. For a few seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The fire crackled behind us. Outside, the wind howled a little harder. But in the dining room, there was only the slow unraveling of a plan that wasn't going the way they rehearsed. Delilah looked at Bianca, and in that glance was a question neither of them wanted to say out loud. Why didn't he fight us? Because I didn't need to. I reached down beside my chair and placed a small box wrapped in matte black paper and tied with a blood-red ribbon on the table. I pushed it toward Delilah. "Your turn," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "What is this?" "A gift. Mine's a little more thoughtful." She hesitated, then untied the ribbon, pulled back the paper, and opened the box. Inside, a leather-bound folder, rich brown, soft to the touch. I watched her hands slow as she opened it. The first page, her signature on a cocktail napkin, now scanned, time-stamped, and printed beside an affidavit of verification. Behind that, our notarized prenup. Ironclad. Reinforced. Binding. She flipped another page. And another. Then came the receipts. Screenshots. Emails. Hotel invoices. Messages from her networking partners. Photos of her and Mason. Time-stamped. All legally obtained. All admissible. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It roared. Bianca went pale. Lorraine's eyes darted from document to Delilah, from Delilah to me. Mitchell looked like he wanted to evaporate. Delilah shut the folder. Her hands trembled. You planned this," she whispered. I finished my wine. Set the glass down gently. "No," I said. "You did." Before anyone could speak, before Delilah could recover from the sting of what she'd just unwrapped. I set my own wine glass down and cleared my throat, gently but firmly. "I have a gift for you, too," I said, my voice calm. "No venom, just finality." The room froze again, still mid-fall from the moment I'd handed her that box. I watched as her fingers hovered above the closed leather folder, as if touching it again might burn her. The confidence she wore like perfume had thinned into something closer to panic. Bianca's mouth hung slightly open, her fork still gripped between trembling fingers, frozen halfway to her plate. Even Lorraine's smug expression had shifted, the corners of her lips turned down in confusion or maybe discomfort. Mitchell just looked at his daughter like he didn't know who she was anymore. I reached down under the table, retrieving a second package, smaller, this one wrapped in gold foil with a black ribbon tied neatly in a bow. I placed it gently in front of Delilah, sliding it across the wood until it was in front of her untouched plate. "Go ahead," I said. "Open it." Her eyes darted between the gift and the folder she had just slammed shut. Her hand moved with hesitation. Gone was the bravado from earlier, the showwoman's grace, the smugness of someone who thought she was the only one in control. She untied the ribbon with less flair this time, peeled back the wrapping, and opened the box. Inside was a second folder, this one thicker, leather-bound, pristine, and embossed with her full name on the front. Her brows drew together. She lifted it slowly, opened the cover, and flipped to the first page. Her breath caught. It was a compilation. Dates, names, receipts, screenshots, voice transcripts, photographs, all laid out with precision, evidence of her affair with Mason, and a few others she clearly hadn't expected me to know about. There was no narrative, no accusations. Just proof. Chronological. Verified. Time-stamped. Collected over months. She flipped more quickly now, each turn more frantic than the last. Her mouth formed words she didn't dare speak. Her skin had gone pale, her movements jerky, her once practiced poise unraveling. Bianca leaned over to see, and I watched the exact moment her composure cracked. Her face drained of color, her lips parted in panic, and she shoved her chair back slightly, as if the folder itself might lunge across the table and accuse her. "Adrian," Lorraine finally said, her voice sharp. "Is this really necessary?" I turned to her slowly. "Yes," I replied. "It's very necessary." Delilah's hands dropped from the folder. She looked at me, and for the first time in what felt like years, her eyes didn't hold amusement or boredom. They held fear. Not the hysterical, falling apart kind, but the slow, dawning realization that the man she'd mocked, underestimated, and belittled had been quietly watching the whole time. Preparing. Calculating. "This isn't admissible," she said, her voice low. I leaned forward slightly. "Actually, it is. All obtained legally. No intercepted messages. No recordings made without consent. All of it backed by timestamps, metadata, and cross-reference statements. But that's not why it's here. This isn't for a courtroom. This is for you. So that when you walk away from this table, there's no doubt what this was." Her jaw clenched. She didn't touch the folder again. I shifted my gaze to Bianca. "And you. I didn't forget about you." Her eyes widened, hands raised slightly like I was about to accuse her of a crime in front of a jury. "I didn't do anything. Didn't you?" I asked. encouraging a married woman to betray her vows, gloating about how I'd react, mocking me in my own home. Your voice is in those recordings, Bianca. You gave her the script. I just stayed quiet long enough to watch the whole play unfold. She turned to Delilah, her voice suddenly brittle. You told me it wasn't serious. You said he'd sign and cry and move out. He was supposed to, Delilah snapped back. He's not supposed to do this. Her voice cracked. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just sat there, still, centered, unmoved. I don't want the house anymore, she said suddenly. I'll walk away. This isn't necessary, Adrian. I tilted my head. But it is. You made a spectacle out of our marriage. I'm giving you the truth, neatly wrapped. You tried to humiliate me tonight. This isn't revenge. This is clarity. Lorraine was fuming now, her hands in her lap, visibly trying to decide whether to intervene or let her daughter bleed in silence. Mitchell looked like he wanted to disappear. I stood, pushed my chair back slowly. I signed your papers. You get what you want, and I'll get what I deserve. Delilah opened her mouth, but I raised my hand gently. One more thing, I added, reaching into my coat and pulling out a final envelope. This is for your parents. I walked over and handed it to Lorraine. She looked up at me like she smelled something foul, but took it anyway. What is this? She asked, lips pursed. An update. Legal documentation of their removal from any estate plans, trust structures, and property inheritance clauses that included them. Effective last month. Mitchell's eyes widened. What? You were both named in those documents years ago, when family still meant something. Consider this your formal notice of disassociation. The room imploded into silence again. I watched Lorraine open the envelope, scanning the lines with the horror of someone seeing their own obituary. Delilah looked between her mother and me, speechless. Bianca had already started gathering her things. I turned to leave. You brought war to a holiday dinner, I said over my shoulder. You expected a performance. You got a presentation instead. I walked out of the dining room as the first plate clattered against the hardwood, someone's hand trembling just enough to lose grip. I didn't flinch. I didn't look back. The gift I gave them wasn't in a box. It wasn't the folder or the documents. It was truth, unfiltered. I gave them exactly what they deserved, something no one in that room had expected from me. Control. And I didn't need to raise my voice to deliver it. You planned this, Delilah had whispered at that table, voice barely tethered to the edge of reason. I still remember how her fingers trembled against the stem of her wine glass. I'd never seen her hands tremble before. Those hands used to move with the confidence of someone who believed the world would always yield to her. Firm, assured, cruel, if necessary. But not that night. That night, her fingers betrayed her. No, I said, calmly, deliberately. You did. The words landed with weight. Not fury, not revenge. Just quiet, undebatable truth. And there's something about truth that shakes people like no shouted accusation ever could. Especially the kind of people who believe they control every narrative. I stood slowly, pushing my chair back with no rush. The scraping sound of the wood against the floor was sharp in the stillness. No one said a word. Even Bianca, who usually filled silence like a reflex, sat frozen. I could see the color still hadn't returned to her face. Lorraine had that sour look she wore any time reality contradicted her assumptions. Mitchell, per Mitchell, kept staring at his daughter like he was finally seeing the woman he helped raise without boundaries. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out 2 envelopes. Simple manila. No ribbons this time. No theatrical bows. Just substance. I walked around the table, past Delilah's now cold plate, past Bianca who wouldn't meet my eyes, and stopped in front of Lorraine and Mitchell. I handed 1 envelope to each of them. Lorraine's hand hovered for a second before she took it, like she was afraid the paper might bite. What is this now? She snapped, trying to reclaim some control. Clarity, I said again. She opened the envelope, scanned the letter inside, and stiffened in her chair like she'd been struck. Her lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. I turned to Mitchell, who opened his more slowly. His mouth hung slightly open as he read, then closed, then opened again. Finally, he looked up and said, You removed us? Yes. I met his gaze, steady. From the will. From the trust. From every clause in the property and inheritance documents. Effective as of last month. Lorraine snapped her head up, eyes ablaze. You can't do that. You were, I interrupted. You were part of our estate plans. Back when I thought this was a family that respected legacy. But you sat at this table and watched your daughter hand me divorce papers like it was a party trick. You knew. You helped her rehearse. And Bianca, I turned, and she flinched. You made bets on how I'd react. None of you thought for a second that I was watching, that I was listening, that I was preparing. And now, you want to talk about what I can or can't do. Delilah stood up now, finally finding her voice. You're being vindictive. This isn't about fairness anymore. This is about payback. No, I said, my tone steady. This is about correction. A recalibration of what I gave and what I received. You made a decision. You wanted out. You brought the papers. You staged the moment. I'm simply meeting the moment with the precision it deserves. She crossed her arms, glaring at me. You're trying to humiliate me. I shook my head. No, Delilah. You did that to yourself. You made a spectacle of our marriage, and I simply refused to play the role of the weeping husband. You gambled on my silence. I chose strategy instead. Bianca muttered something under her breath, maybe a curse, maybe a prayer, but she stood and grabbed her coat, clearly unable to stomach another second. I have to go, she mumbled, fumbling with the strap of her purse. I didn't sign up for this. No, I said, without looking at her. You just wrote the dialogue. She froze at the door, hand on the knob. Delilah didn't stop her. Lorraine didn't call after her. Mitchell just looked relieved she was leaving. Bianca slipped out, the door closing with a soft thud behind her. The sound echoed louder than I expected. I turned back to the room. The dining table, once a carefully curated holiday centerpiece, now looked like the aftermath of a battle. Plates barely touched. Glasses with lipstick smears. The candles flickered uncertainly. It all felt still. Unnaturally so. The sound of losing control, I realized, wasn't screaming. It wasn't plates breaking or voices raised. It was that thick silence. The absence of defense. The realization, finally, that no one's coming to save the person who thought they were untouchable. Delilah sat down again, slowly this time, like the weight of the night was finally catching up to her spine. So what happens now? She asked. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not the woman I married, but the echo of someone I once loved. A version of her that never really existed. She had performed that role well for years. But now, sitting there without her audience, stripped of the power she thought was hers by default, she looked lost. What happens now, I said, is simple. You leave with what you brought. No more. No less. You waive your claim to the house. Your signature confirms that. The assets stay with me. The accounts you thought were joint were separated months ago. The legal documents have been updated. And the trust your parents assumed they'd be part of? That was rewritten too. Everything is accounted for. Everything is legal. And everything is done. She blinked slowly. So that's it. I gave a soft nod. That's it. Mitchell stood, almost cautiously, as if moving too fast might fracture the moment further. I think we should go. Lorraine didn't argue. She folded the letter back into the envelope with hands far less graceful than usual and stood as well. This isn't over, she muttered. I looked at her, calm. For you, maybe not. But for me, it's been over for a long time. I'm just now giving it the ending it deserves. They walked out in silence. No goodbyes. No attempts at salvaging anything. Just the slow, heavy footsteps of people who finally realized they no longer held the upper hand. Delilah stayed seated. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at the flickering candles like they might flicker differently if she waited long enough. I left her there. Walked upstairs. Took off my jacket. Washed my hands. Changed into something comfortable. And for the first time in years, I heard something I hadn't heard in my own home in forever. Peace. The sound of control returning to the one who had always deserved it. The morning after didn't feel like morning at all. It felt like aftershock. Stillness layered in the dust of something that used to stand tall and proud but now sat cracked and exposed. Sunlight crept through the windows cautiously, as if even it wasn't sure whether it was welcome in a house that had hosted a war. But I was already awake, long before the first golden strands touched the floors. I hadn't slept, not because I was anxious, but because I was alert. A different kind of wakefulness. The kind that comes after months of silence when your voice finally returns and doesn't shake when you use it. Delilah was gone. I'd heard the front door close around 3 a.m. Softly, as if she still cared not to wake me. Or maybe she just didn't want to face whatever might be waiting if I heard her leaving. She hadn't packed bags. I checked. Just her phone, her clutch, a coat, and that smirk she'd worn for years, now cracked and useless. She was staying at a hotel. I knew which one before she even chose it, the Crimson, downtown. Sleek, polished, discreet. The same one where 2 of her networking retreats had taken place. I didn't call her. Didn't text. Didn't need to. Let her sit in that room wrapped in designer linen, sipping overpriced room service lattes, wondering if the image in the mirror was still salvageable. My phone buzzed shortly after sunrise. Bianca. Of course. Her name blinked on the screen like a desperate warning. I let it ring. She tried again. Twice. Then once more from a different number. Still, I didn't answer. There was nothing left for her to twist. Whatever she wanted to say would be self-preservation disguised as apology, or worse, denial. I wasn't interested in either. I made coffee. A full pot. French press. The way I liked it. Not the way she used to make it. Diluted with almond milk and cinnamon she never cleaned out of the filter. Just bold, clean, black. I stood at the window, sipping from my favorite mug, the one she once called too ugly to leave out, and watched the frost melt off the glass as the sun climbed higher. The house was silent, and for the first time in what felt like years, it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was peace. Untouched. Undisturbed. No condescension humming in the background. No cold shoulders disguised as busy schedules. Just me. Breathing. Around mid-morning, Marcus arrived. My oldest friend. My lawyer. My mirror when I didn't recognize myself anymore. He didn't knock. Just walked in like he always had, holding a stack of manila folders and a bag of bagels. She's at the Crimson, he said, setting everything down on the kitchen counter. Filed under her maiden name. I nodded. Of course. He reached into the bag, tossed me one of the bagels, and took the stool across from me. You good? I'm better than good, I said. I'm done. He studied me. You know this was clean. Surgical. No debris left. Not many people can do that. She wanted a show, I said, shrugging. I gave her documentation. Marcus smirked, opened one of the folders, and flipped through a set of forms. Title transfer on the house, already filed. She signed away claim without even realizing it. The financial waiver she mocked in that napkin joke? That's bulletproof. We'll lock in sole ownership by the end of the week. The trust is secured. The will is updated. Her parents won't see a cent. I nodded again, slower this time. Thank you. He leaned back. You know, I watched you for years pretend like her disrespect didn't cut you. Thought maybe you were too passive. But you weren't asleep. You were playing a longer game. I let the words settle before answering. I wasn't playing. I was surviving. He nodded. Same thing sometimes. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. Marcus stayed for an hour, reviewed the last pieces of the paperwork, then left without fanfare. Just a solid clasp on my shoulder and a call me if she starts spinning stories. She would. Eventually. But that wasn't my problem anymore. By noon, I had changed the locks. Not out of spite, out of finality. She wouldn't be coming back, not without permission, and certainly not with an attitude that assumed she still owned part of me. I walked room by room, taking inventory not of what she left, but of what I had regained. My space. My time. My breath. In the guest room, I painted the walls. A new shade of green, deep, bold, masculine. A color she once said was too cold for company. It felt like calm to me. I moved an armchair in front of the window, brought up a shelf of books she'd boxed up years ago to make space for her statement pieces. I filled that shelf with stories I hadn't had time to finish. And beside them, I placed the black notebooks, the ones from the garage. The journals that had held my pain, my truth, my clarity. Not as trophies, as reminders. I installed a new coffee machine, the one she said we didn't need. Too expensive, too bulky. We're not baristas, Adrian. I bought it anyway. Set it up in the kitchen like a small rebellion that smelled like fresh beans and freedom. I deleted our shared playlists, removed her from my streaming accounts, reclaimed my passwords, took her name off everything except the divorce paperwork, where it now sat permanently inked beside mine. I even cleared out the closet. Donated the cocktail dresses she left behind, boxed the heels I knew she wouldn't miss, and kept the one leather jacket she used to steal from me before everything went bitter. It didn't smell like her anymore. It smelled like me. The only message she sent that day came around 3:47 p.m. 4 words. We should talk soon. No apology. No explanation. Just a vague plea for something unsaid. I didn't respond. I archived the message, flagged it for the legal folder, and went back to organizing my office. That night, I lit a fire in the living room. Just for myself. No guests. No performance. I turned off all the overhead lights and watched the flames dance against the walls we used to argue in. I pulled a blanket over my lap, the one she never liked because it didn't match the decor, and I sipped a whiskey that had been aging longer than our marriage lasted. I wasn't celebrating. I was exhaling. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number this time. Probably Bianca. Maybe her fiancé. Someone with something to say. I didn't answer. The world that tried to break me no longer had access to me. I was behind a gate now, one built not of bitterness, but boundaries. Outside, the wind howled against the siding. The tree lights flickered through the front windows, still blinking red and white, even after everything. It felt strange, the holidays still happening after such a rupture. But then again, maybe it wasn't strange at all. Maybe it was fitting. A time of clearing out. Of endings and beginnings. I stared into the fire and listened to the wood crackling, to the wind whistling, to the quiet hum of a house returning to its heartbeat. No footsteps pacing. No sharp laughter from the kitchen. No veiled insults wrapped in silk. Just space. Just silence. Just mine. By the time the flames died down, I realized something I hadn't dared believe in months. I wasn't broken. I wasn't even bruised anymore. What exploded wasn't me. It was the illusion. The facade. And now that the debris was cleared, all that remained was something solid. Something steady. Something that looked an awful lot like peace. And for the first time in years, I didn't brace for what came next. I welcomed it. It's been 6 months. Half a year since Delilah handed me divorce papers like they were a joke gift and expected a performance. 6 months since I signed my name, smiled, and changed the rhythm of the room forever. People still talk. Quietly. Sometimes curiously. Sometimes with pity. Sometimes with a strange reverence, like they've only now started to understand that calm doesn't mean weak. That silence doesn't mean surrender. Bianca tried first. Of course she did. 2 weeks after everything unraveled, she took to social media in that faux casual way she does everything. Long posts about loyalty and truth being manipulated. Not once did she name me, but she didn't have to. The subtweets, the cryptic captions, the screenshots that lacked context, it was all there. She tried to shape the story like she was the one wronged, like she'd simply been a friend caught in the middle. But she underestimated the internet's appetite for receipts. People asked questions. People remembered her laughter on videos, her comments on photos, her bragging over wine. Then someone, probably someone from her fiancé's circle, leaked part of the voice memo I'd legally submitted to my lawyer. The one where she joked about betting I'd cry. Her fiancé left her 3 days after that. Quietly. With a moving van and a statement that said everything without needing words. I no longer recognized the woman I agreed to marry. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just archived the article, filed it, and went on with my day. Delilah called once. A number I didn't know. She didn't leave a voicemail. I didn't call back. What was there to say? She had the ending she orchestrated, and I had the peace I earned. Everything else was noise. Now, my days are simple. I rise early, not because I have to, but because I want to. I brew coffee with that overpriced machine she said we didn't need. It grinds fresh beans with a soft whir and fills the kitchen with a warmth I never felt when she was in it. I sit by the window in the green guest room I repurposed into a reading nook. The morning light pours in there, unobstructed, honest. I read again. Fiction. History. Anything that reminds me how vast the world is outside of the version I had to survive. In the evenings, I cook. Real meals. Dishes I'd long forgotten how to enjoy because she always insisted we eat out or order something that looked good on her Instagram story. Now it's roasted vegetables, seasoned the way I like. The first time I made banana bread, steak done medium rare without debate. It cracked in the middle, doesn't need approval. Perfect and golden. I even learned how to bake. I kept it that way. Sometimes I sit on the porch with a drink and let the night settle around me. Neighbors wave. Some know. Some don't. Doesn't matter. I'm not the man they whispered about anymore. I'm not a rumor. I'm not her husband. I'm just Adrian again. And that's more than enough. There's someone new. Not a replacement. A presence. Her name is Elise. We met at the local bookstore. She was arguing with the clerk about a missing copy of a poetry collection. I stepped in, offered mine. She smiled like she meant it. We talked for 2 hours without realizing the time. She doesn't know all of it yet. But she knows enough. And she listens with the kind of quiet curiosity that makes you feel seen, not studied. We take it slow, not because we're afraid, but because we're not in a race. There's no finish line, just pages we're turning together. And the house? It's mine now, not just legally, spiritually. I painted the front door, changed the locks. I hung new art, pieces that speak instead of just show off. I don't avoid the dining room anymore. I sit there on Sundays with jazz playing low and nothing on my calendar. The candles still flicker, but now they flicker for warmth, not warfare. Peace, I've learned, isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with grand gestures or dramatic moments. It seeps in quietly. It hums in the background. It lingers in the spaces where noise used to live. It's the sound of waking up without dread. The rhythm of breathing deeply without wondering what storm is next. It's the sound of a man who was underestimated, discarded, and betrayed, but never destroyed. The man they bet would crumble? He didn't. He signed the paper, smiled at the performance, and handed them a rapt reminder of what they misjudged. Never bet against the calm ones.